بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. So our topic today is on maintaining, or the importance of maintaining good health in Islam. And we begin today's lecture with the hadith in which the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, نعمتان مغبون فيهما كثير من الناس. There are two favors, there are two bounties which many of the people lose out with respect to. Two favors which many people lose out with respect to. And he said, الصحة والفراغ. الصحة والفراغ. Which means good health and free time. Good health and free time. Sheikh Abdul Aziz ibn Baz rahimahullah ta'ala, he commented upon this hadith and he said, يعني كثير من الناس, many people, they waste their health and waste their spare time without any benefit. And then he continues and he says that a person being sound in his body, being healthy in his body, when he has free time as well. So a person has these things, but then he does not use them in what benefits him, in what brings him closer to Allah, in what benefits him in the world. So many people lose out in relation to these two favors in that they do not use them for what will benefit them. And so he continues and he says that indeed وَإِنَّمَا يَنْبَغِي لِلْمُؤْمِنِ أَنْ يَسْتَغِلَّ هَذِهِ النِّعْمَةِ فِيمَا يَرْضَ اللَّهِ. It is desirable for a believer that he uses these favors, if he has them, in what pleases Allah and in what benefits him, such as trade, tijara, trade, and various other forms of lawful earnings, kasab, which is halal, and in increasing in fasting and prayer and remembrance and acts of obedience, like visiting the sick, for example, and enjoining the good and prohibiting the evil and calling to Allah Azza wa Jal, and other such aspects of goodness. So this is a favor of good health is one of the many favors that Allah Azza wa Jal has granted to mankind, as he mentions in his book, وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا, that if you were to enumerate the favors of Allah, you would not be able to do so. And health, sound health, is one of those great and mighty favors, and it comes after that which is even greater, which is Islam and the Sunnah. Islam and the Sunnah, Tawheed, Islam, the Sunnah is the greatest favor that Allah Azza wa Jal has bestowed upon mankind. And there are many other favors which come after that, and from them is health. And health is one of those affairs for which gratitude is due to Allah Azza wa Jal. وَاشْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ إِن كُنْتُمْ إِيَّاهُ تَعْبُدُونَ. Be grateful to Allah if it is indeed Him alone that you worship. So just like we see that to preserve the ni'mah of Allah, when we look at the things which preserve the favors and bounties of Allah, they include obedience to Allah, righteousness, establishing the pillars of Islam, establishing the commandments that Allah has made, keeping away from the prohibitions, all of these, they help to preserve the favors of Allah. They will keep coming so long as we maintain this. And likewise, preservation of health, to preserve your health, because health is a ni'mah from Allah Azza wa Jal. And so therefore, to maintain that ni'mah is part and parcel of shukr, part and parcel of being grateful to Allah Azza wa Jal. Now, health is the default. Everybody is born with health. Health is the majority condition. So most of the time you are healthy because that is the asal. And disease or sickness is something which arises, it emanates. It's not the default for the overwhelming majority of people. Right? It's something that arises due to circumstances, situations. And so a person, he is healthy and at times he moves towards illness. And as Sheikh Salih Al-Fawzan mentions when he often quotes the ayat in the Quran that speak about the calamities, وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن مُّصِيبَةٍ فَبِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيكُمْ فَبِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيكُمْ وَيَعْفُو عَنْ كَثِيرٍ. That whatever calamity befalls you, then it is by way of what your hands have earned. And yet he pardons many. And so the Shaykh mentions from the list of things that arise, the calamities that arise as a result of sins and disobedience, he mentions amongst them illnesses. Illnesses. And so illnesses, there are obviously different reasons as to why illnesses occur. And as Muslims, we have to be careful that we don't have a narrow-minded view of health and disease. Health and disease. Because when you look into the sciences and the knowledge of the non-Muslims, of the disbelievers, then because they believe in materialism, because they believe in, they discount the fact that human actions have a role to play in material affairs. Right? So this is what we know from the Sharia, that human actions, the deeds of humans, that they have a tangible effect on the affairs of the world. And so calamities arise because of human actions. We believe this because we have been informed in the revelation that this is a fact. It is a rule in Allah's creation. And there are many examples of this in the Sunnah, in the Quran and the Sunnah. By way of example, when people commit open obscenity, diseases spread. When people withhold the zakah, the rain is withheld. When people cheat in weights and measures, there appear tyrannical rulers and famines and hardship. Right? So these are human actions which lead to effects. And so similarly, when we look at the causes of disease, we mentioned here, as Shaykh Salih Fawzan commented upon this ayah, that illnesses are part and parcel of the calamities that arise as a result of the deeds of men. Right? So the point being here that we have to be open-minded when we look at the issue of health and disease and not fall into the materialist, narrow-minded vision of health and disease. Right? So it's something to keep that in mind. So in other words, you might go and get diagnosed with a disease or an illness, an acute illness, and it might be explained that the reason was such and such and such and such, which in and of itself, it might be true, right? Because a material cause has been explained for your disease. But that material cause itself could have arisen from something else. Right? So this is the point that we are making here, that that we have to be open-minded and not fall into the materialist, narrow-minded explanation of the causes of disease and the causes of health. So keep that in mind. So, as we said, a person fluctuates then between health and disease. The asl, the foundation, is health, that you have good health. And due to circumstances, you fall into disease. Now, nations, civilizations, cultures for thousands and thousands of years, because of this fluctuation between health and disease, which happens from time to time, they have developed certain approaches in trying to deal with conditions of disease, conditions of illness. And these approaches that they've taken depend upon the climate that they live in, the region of the earth that they live in, because different regions have different climates. Likewise, on the foodstuffs which are available to them, in terms of what is their diet, what are the main foodstuffs that they are eating, what types of herbs grow in that region, what types of plants, what types of trees grow in that region, how they make use of the food, such as animals, the various parts and elements of animals, the fat of an animal, the skin of an animal, the flesh of an animal, the whatever else, right? So different cultures have developed their own approaches to medicine on the basis of what Allah has made available to them. And for that reason, you see every culture has its own approaches towards medicine, has its own cures. And this has come about by way of empirical testing, empirical experiments, right? Because it's tried and tested over generations and generations and generations. That knowledge has been saved and then refined over time. And so this is the nature of medicine, and all medicine in history has always been like this. And as Ibn Al-Qayyim points out, that modern medicine, which in his time would have been the modern medicine then, that all of it has its foundation in the medicine of local cultures, local civilizations. It's derived from that. The principles are taken from that. So once we understand this, we should then understand that when we put all of the experience of all of these cultures and civilizations over thousands and thousands of years, when we put all of that together, we will see that there are certain universals, there are certain universal principles which are common to all of these cultures and civilizations, or to the medicine of the cultures and civilizations of all of these people. And for that reason, when we look into the revelation, the Quran and the Sunnah, we know that it is come with every good, with every benefit in the world and in the hereafter, whether it is to do with the deen or whether it is to do with the dunya. And it has come, the Quran and the Sunnah have come with universal principles of medicine. The Quran and the Sunnah, broadly speaking, we don't see, very detailed guidance in the Quran and the Sunnah. For example, for this disease do such and such, for that disease do such, in a detailed, comprehensive sense. But rather we see that there are universal principles, and there are certain diseases for which there are certain things which are mentioned, but on the whole it is principles, universal principles. And that's because all cultures, all civilizations, they live in different climates, they have different diets, they have different habitats, they have different lifestyles, and so therefore they have medicine that is unique to them. And for that reason, the Quran and the Sunnah have brought universal principles which if a person sticks to and applies, then he will be healthy by the will and the permission of Allah Azza wa Jal. So once all of that is clear, I want to mention some things from this great and mighty book of Ibn Al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, called Zadul Ma'ad, and particularly the volume that deals with the prophetic medicine, At-Tibbun Nabawi. This is the 4th volume in this print, and the first 10 or so pages are absolutely amazing. So I want to share some of the things that Ibn Al-Qayyim has mentioned to lay a foundation for the second part of the talk. So my talk is in 2 parts really. The first is just this muqaddimah, this introduction, and then we want to comment upon these pages of Ibn Al-Qayyim about general principles of medicine, universal principles of medicine. And then from there, we will move into looking at 8 or 9 things which have come in the Quran and the Sunnah as a means of establishing good health. 8 or 9 affairs in the Quran and the Sunnah which establish good health, which again are universal things as well. So that will be the second part of the talk. So the first part of the talk, let's go into the introduction to Ibn Al-Qayyim's book. And there are many gems, there are many treasures in this book, especially in the beginning part of the book. And so he begins by saying, in the opening chapter, that we will mention here some beneficial chapters from the guidance of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam regarding medicine, by which he himself practiced medicine, and which he described to others. And we will explain what it contains of wisdom, which the intellects of the majority of the physicians, the majority of the doctors, are unable to fathom, are unable to reach, and to explain that the relationship of their medicine to that of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is like the relationship of the medicine of the barren old women, the things that they talk about, right, to that. So in other words, just like the unsophisticated, crude, anecdotal medicine of the old women is inferior to the medicine of the physicians of this world, then in a similar way, the relationship to their medicine, it's the same to the medicine of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's the same relationship. And then he says, فَنَقُولُ وَبِاللَّهِ الْمُسْتَعَانِ Then so we say, and from Allah is all aid sought. And then he says, الْمَرَضْ نَوْعَانِ Illness is of 2 types. مَرْضُ الْقُلُوبِ وَمَرْضُ الْأَبْدَانِ The disease of the hearts and the disease of the bodies. And so we're not concerned here about the disease of the hearts because this is not our topic. But as for the disease of the hearts, he mentions briefly here that the marad of the qulub, the illness of the heart, is two types. The first of them is the illness of shubha and shak. When the heart is doubtful, when it has a misconception, this is considered to be an illness of the heart. And the second is the marad of shahwa wa ghay. Shahwa meaning lust. So when your heart lusts after certain things, and when it is, errant and misguided, this likewise is the disease of the heart. He goes on to mention some ayat in the Quran in relation to these diseases of the heart, and likewise the shahawat as well, to bring evidences. But as this is not our topic for today, we will leave that. But we move on to the second part then, which is the illness of the bodies. The illness of the bodies. And he establishes that the illness of the bodies, the foundations and the principles of medicine and illness have all been laid down in the Quran, and there are 3 of them. There are 3 universal principles that relate to health and sickness. And in the Quran we see that Allah Azza wa Jal, as Ibn Al-Qayyim explains, that they're all mentioned in the context of acts of worship. In the context of acts of worship, in relation to Hajj, in relation to fasting, in relation to wudu'. And so he says that all of the principles of medicinal treatment of the bodies are centered around 3, and they are as follows. The first of them is حفظ الصحة. The first one is that you preserve the good health that you already have. So the good health that you're already enjoying, then you must preserve that. This is the first principle. The second principle is al-himyatu anil mu'dhi, which is then to protect yourself from everything that is harmful. So the first is preservation of good health. The second is protection and precautions, taking precautions, being careful against things that are going to harm your health. That's the second principle. And the third principle is istifragh al-mawad al-fasida, which is to remove harmful elements, the elements that can be present on your body or within your body that are the cause of actual disease, to extract them and to remove them. So these three principles have been mentioned in the Quran. Ibn Al-Qayyim has derived them from the Quran, and he mentions that each of them have been mentioned in relation to an act of worship or acts of worship. So we'll mention the proofs for each one. So as for the first one, the ayah which relates to fasting, so Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. So whoever amongst you is ill or upon a journey, then let him make up from other days. So he mentioned here that the ill person is allowed to break his fast due to the excuse of disease, and the traveler as well. Now the traveler, he is allowed him to break the fast or not keep the fast in order to maintain his health, in order to preserve the health that he has, and in order to preserve his vitality and his strength, his health and his strength, so that the fasting whilst he's on a journey does not harm him. Because when he's journeying, there is extreme movement, there is tiredness of the body, and when a person travels, then food is not easy to come by or to consume, and all of this basically takes away from his strength, his vitality. It weakens him and it makes him prone to ill health. So here we can see the principle here is the preservation of existing health. And so Ibn Al-Qayyim has derived it from this ayah. Then as for al-himya, which is taking precaution and protection, then this is in the ayah in relation to wudu'. And so he mentioned وَإِن كُنْتُم مَرْضَى أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ أَوْ جَاءَ أَحَدٌ مِّنكُم مِّنَ الْغَائِطِ أَوْ لَامَسْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ فَلَمْ تَجِدُوا مَاءً فَتَيَمَّمُوا سَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا. This is the ayah of tayammum. So he mentioned that if you are ill, or if you are upon a journey, or one of you have come after relieving himself, or you have had relations with women and you do not find water, then use dust or sand, clean, wholesome sand, and basically it's an ayah to do. The ayah is related to tayammum and not using water. So here, the ill person has been allowed to turn away from water and to use just a turab, which is just the dust or the sand as part of tayammum. And this is so that his body is not subject to any harm as a result of that. And so here the principle, so if we look at the general principle here, the general principle is to avoid something, an element, something in which there is physical contact like water, which can be harmful to the person, whether externally in the body or internally in the body. And so this is the second principle. And the third principle is the removal of harmful elements. And this is derived from the ayah which relates to Hajj. In this ayah, Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ بِهِ أَذَى مِنْ رَأْسِهِ فَفِدْيَةٌ مِنْ صِيَامٍ أَوْ صَدَقَةٍ أَوْ نُسُكٍ. So he said, any one of you who is ill or who has some harm in his head, meaning there is some infection or there are some in his head, there are lice or something, and he has an infection, and then he makes a ransom by way of fasting or charity or some other, there are some other acts of devotion. So here the ill person and the one who has some harm in his, lice in his head or infestation in his head, that he is allowed to basically shave his head whilst in ihram in order to remove the harmful elements. And so the general principle here then is, the analogy which is then made general is removing every harmful element from the body, and this can be internal as well as external, that is the cause of disease. The cause of disease. And these things can be many, the principle applies to many things. It can apply to things like sickness, it can apply to urine or feces or wind or sickness or, these are general things, but then it also applies to other things like infections and so on and so forth, whether internal or external. The general principle is removal of the harmful element, whether external or internal. So here then, we see that all of this establishes three principles of health. And notice that two of these three principles are centered around the preservation of good health and the protection from harm. Right? So this is a major part of medicine. From medicine is the preservation of health and protection away from harmful things. This is the major part of medicine. So medicine, in other words, we need to change our way of thinking that medicine is not receiving medical treatment. It's not just receiving medical treatment. That is not just what is medicine, what is conceived as medicine. At-tib, as explained in the Quran and the Sunnah and as explained here by Ibn Al-Qayyim, is more general. There are some steps before this step of actual treatment, which is the preservation of good health. This is part and parcel of medicine. And likewise, protection away from harmful elements as a means of preserving health. That too is part and parcel of tib, of medicine. And so once this is clear then, we see that the actual treatment of the bodies, so now we've established the diseases of the bodies in terms of the usul or the qawaid of tib. Then he goes on to mention that as for the tib of the bodies, there are, or in fact, as for the tib of the hearts, then this is something that can only come from the prophets and messengers. The curing of the hearts, the cure for that, the tib of that, the medicine for that, then it comes only from the prophets and messengers. There is no other way for the healing of the hearts, the healing of shubha and shak, and the healing of shahwa and ghay, which is misconceptions and lusts. This only comes from revealed knowledge. It cannot come from any other place. Right? So this again is not our topic today. We're not delving on this. But to come to the main point, which is the medicine of the bodies. It is of two types. The first is something that Allah has put inherently within every single body. Allah has made it an instinct in every single body. For example, when you are hungry, when you go without food, there are the pains of hunger that make you instinctually, by instinct, to go and seek food. Right? Likewise, when you are thirsty, by instinct, you go and seek water. And there are other things as well. When you, for example, the sneeze itself is an instinct. You don't really control it at will, it's an instinct. And there are many other things that Allah has put within the body that are natural, instinctive things by the way of the fitrah, which is considered to be a treatment of the body. It is built in, right? And it's instinctive. The second type are those which actually refer to study, investigation, reflection, and all of these other types of illnesses that we experience and for which we have to seek cures. So this is the second type of medicinal treatment, the second type of tib. And so whenever a body is in a situation of illness, then we research, we try different things, and that's why we said that the medicine of cultures, civilizations and nations have all been built upon empirical testing and experience, and through that they've gained knowledge of how to treat different diseases through different methods and means, by way of diet, precautions in the diet, by way of herbs, by way of other things. So all of this is by way of experience, empirical testing, knowledge, and so on and so forth. Then he goes on to mention that the body, the human body itself, can only have three conditions. Either it is in sound health, sound natural health, or it is outside of its natural state and condition, in which case it is ill, or it is a stage in between. A stage in between. So when it's in its natural state, it is healthy. When it is out of its natural state, it is unhealthy. And in between, there always has to be an intermediate step, because a body does not become healthy to unhealthy just like that. There's always an intermediate stage. So there's a stage in which the body is between the two conditions. So after mentioning this, he then goes on to explain the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So after we've established all these principles about the disease is that of the heart and the body. As for that of the heart, it is shubha and shahwa. As for that of the body, there are three universal principles. And after that we mentioned that the tib of the heart is only given by the prophets and messengers by revelation. And as for the tib of the body, there are two forms of it. The first, which is inherent and natural, which Allah has built in from His favors and bounties. And the second is that which is subject to research and investigation. And the body itself can be in three conditions: in its natural state of being healthy, in its unnatural state of being unhealthy, and a state in between. Right? And a state in between. Now when we come to the guidance of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we see that from his guidance is that he would actually adopt medicinal treatments. He would treat himself, and he would order the one who was ill to make use of medicine. And from his way, if you look, as Ibn Al-Qayyim says, that from his guidance, or it was not from his guidance and not from the guidance of his companions, to use these advanced compound types of drugs. That's what Ibn Al-Qayyim says. He says rather most of what they would use would be simple elements, simple individual elements, and sometimes they might combine one or two of these simple individual elements. And this is the basis of the medicine of most of the nations of the earth. This is what he says, that the medicine of most of the nations of the earth is of this type. And then he goes on to mention some of the principles of the physicians, that, for example, when you are able to treat an illness by way of precautions in diet and nutrition, then you do that first without resorting to something else. And then every disease which can be treated by way of diet and precautions, then it should be taken first without moving on to other types of treatments. And he goes on to mention some of these other principles. And this now really leads us to our main part, or the main part of our subject. And this is, what do we find in the Quran and the Sunnah in relation to general guidelines regarding medicine. And so before we do, in fact, we'll move on to that next, inshallah ta'ala. And so now we're going to look at the methodology of Islam. What do we find in the text of the Quran and the Sunnah as a broad methodology of how a person maintains good health? And we see that in the Sharia, there are many legislations, there are many principles by which the health of an individual can be actualized. And predominantly this approach is preventative medicine. So in the Quran and the Sunnah, the major approach is preventative medicine, that you prevent yourself from being ill and from being sick. And this is the major part of medicine. And that's why good health is an individual responsibility. Right? The major part of medicine, as we've established from Ibn Al-Qayyim, is preserving good health and protecting it from harm. And this is an individual responsibility. And when you see it from that perspective, that it is an individual responsibility, then you will then tie it to the fact that this is a ni'mah from Allah Azza wa Jal, and being grateful to Allah Azza wa Jal for this ni'mah is to preserve one's good health. Why? Because as you've seen from the very first statement from Shaykh Ibn Baz rahimahullah ta'ala, that good health allows a person to do many, many things which are beneficial for him in this life and the next. From obedience to Allah, from calling to Allah, from pursuing the affairs of the world, like trade and business and so on and so forth. And all of this basically supports and aids a servant in his deen and his dunya. And so when we look at it from this point of view, that it is an individual responsibility and it is largely preventative. Most of medicine should be preventative. Right? It is not that once you've lived an unhealthy lifestyle, you develop a chronic disease, now you seek the cure and the treatment for this disease. Right? Rather, it is largely the major part of medicine is preventative. So when we look in the Quran and the Sunnah and we look at all of these general legislations that have a connection to health, we will see that they are all preventative, that they are all related to prevention of the disease before its treatment. Now, the health itself is something that we find being praised in the Quran. Allah Azza wa Jal, He mentions in relation to Talut in Surah Al-Baqarah. He mentions that He gave Talut knowledge, al-ilm, and al-quwwah fil jism. He gave him ilm and He gave him bodily strength. So the mention of bodily strength is a praise of a strong body. He mentions in Surah Al-Baqarah verse 247, وَزَادَهُ بَسْطَةً فِي الْعِلْمِ وَالْجِسْمِ وَاللَّهُ يُؤْتِي مُلْكَهُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَاللَّهُ وَاسِعٌ عَلِيمٌ. So he mentions here about Talut that he gave him increase in ilm, in knowledge, and in al-jism, in body. So these are praiseworthy things. That you increase in your knowledge is something praiseworthy for you, and that you increase in your bodily strength is something praiseworthy for you. Likewise, we see the hadith that we mentioned at the beginning, narrated by Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, نعمتان مغبون فيهما كثير من الناس الصحة والفراغ. Two favors which many people lose out with respect to: sound health and spare time. And we see that there are poetry as well which drives home this message. As a rough translation of the poetry, that even though gathering wealth amazes me, there is nothing to me that equals the health of the body, bodily health. Even though gathering wealth amazes me, nothing is equal to bodily health. In wealth, there is a type of pleasure of seeing wealth and beautification. And in having children, there is a type of honor and nobility. But when you suffer illness, it will make you forget the remembrance of your wealth and the remembrance of your children. Right? This is a beautiful message by the poet, that even though wealth is something that amazes you, there is nothing equal to good health. And even though you might, get enjoyment from looking at your wealth, your houses and your cars and your bank balances and so on and so forth, and the notes that you have stashed away, this might amaze you. And your children, when you look at them, you might feel honored and ennobled. But as soon as you are sick and ill and you are in the bed with a fever, an infection, and your heart is pounding away and you think you are going to die, you will forget everything. Your wealth will not be on your mind, and your children will not be on your mind, and you will wish as if all the wealth that you had was able to save you. And many people will see this is a reality. They have cancer. The doctors tell them you're about to die. They have thousands upon thousands upon thousands. They have wealth like nobody's business. What good is that wealth to them? Nothing. So at this point, sickness will make you forget all of wealth. So the point being here then, from these texts, and likewise we see the same indication from the hadith of Salama bin Ubaidillah bin Mihsan al-Ansari radiyallahu anhu, from his father, who said, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من أصبح منكم معافا في جسده آمنا في سربه عنده قوت يومه فكأنما حيزت له الدنيا, reported by Al-Bukhari in Al-Adab Al-Mufrad. He says, whoever amongst you wakes up being healthy in his body, meaning his body is free from any ailments, and he is serene in his mind, he's of calm mind, he's at peace, he's at ease, and he has with him the provision for that day, he has with him food and drink for that day, then it is as if he has gathered all the treasure of all of the world. Meaning that when you wake up in the morning and your body is sound and healthy, and you have nothing worrying you, you are at peace and ease and serene and calm, and you have with you the food just for that day, then it's as if the treasure of the whole world you've collected all of it. This is an indication again of good health, of having good health, waking up and having a sound body. And then we see that the point that we made earlier on about calamities, and the ayah in the Quran about calamities and its connection to the fact that illnesses are a type of calamity and the relationship to that, then just look at these examples given by Ibn Rajab rahimahullah ta'ala. He says in Jami' al-Ulum wal-Hikam, in commenting upon a particular hadith, he says, Man hafidh Allah fi sabahu wa quwwatihi hafidhahu Allah fi hali kibarihi wa da'fi quwwatihi wa matta'ahu bi sam'ihi wa basrihi wa hawlihi wa quwwatihi wa aqlihi. He says, whoever safeguards Allah, is watchful and mindful of Allah in his youth, in his prime, in his youth, and in his strength. So if you are watchful and mindful of Allah Azza wa Jal, you fear Him, whilst you are in the peak of your youth, and in your strength, Allah will protect and safeguard him in his old age, when his strength weakens, and He will allow him to continue to benefit from his hearing and his seeing and his strength and his vitality and his intellect. In other words, the way to preserve sound health in older age is to fear Allah Azza wa Jal in the younger age. And just look at the example he gives. He says, some of the scholars, وَكَانَ بَعْضُ الْعُلَمَاءِ قَدْ جَاوَزَ الْمِئَةِ سَنَةً. Some of the scholars had reached more than 100 years in age, and he continues to enjoy his vitality and his intellect, meaning he is of sound mind, enjoying his full intellect past the age of 100. He has with him his full bodily strength and his vitality. And he's talking about the same scholar, he's speaking about an individual scholar. Then once this scholar, he made a large leap, something that you'd only see like a youth do. Like a youth they like to, compete with each other, and they show off in terms of who can do the greatest feat in terms of a leap or a climb or something like this. And so this alim, he made a large leap or a jump. And so he was blamed for that, and criticized that, in your old age, you are doing this. And so this alim, he said, هذه جوارح حفظناها عن المعاصي في الصغر فحفظها الله علينا في الكبر. He said, these are limbs that we protected from disobedience whilst we were young. And so Allah protected them for us whilst we became old. And he continues, وَأَقْصْ هَذَا, he says, and then the reverse of this, that some of the Salaf saw a sheikh, a particular sheikh, going around asking people, being in need of people, and then he said, إن هذا ضعيف ضيع الله في صغره فضيعه الله في كبره. Indeed, this man is a weak man. He neglected Allah whilst he was young, and so Allah neglected him whilst he was old. So, from this, the point that I want to mention again is that we should not be narrow-minded in our understanding of health and disease. And we should not forget the rules of Allah in His creation, because human actions have effects upon things, something that the disbelievers and the atheists and the philosophers do not accept. But we believe this because this we have been told through revelation. And so here we see that good health, sound health, retaining your faculties of hearing, seeing, the ability to think, the ability to use your intellect, that their longevity is something that is determined by your actions when you are younger, your obedience to Allah Azza wa Jal. And likewise taking the ways and the means, the wasa'il, the asbab, in order to protect good bodily health, and and so on and so forth. So from this we see likewise an indication of the focus on health is from Anas bin Malik radiallahu anhu, who said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Ad-du'a la yurad bayna al-adhan wal-iqamah." Dua is not rejected between the adhan and the iqamah. And so they said, then what shall we say, O Messenger of Allah? Look at what he said. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Sallallahu al-afiyata fi dunya wal-akhirah." He said, ask Allah for al-afiyah in this life and the next. Al-afiyah is well-being, good health. We are told to supplicate for well-being, which is good health, between the adhan and the iqamah. So, all of this is an evidence, all of these texts which I've brought to you are an evidence, therefore, of the concern that Islam, the Sharia, the legislation, the Quran and the Sunnah have for health, the status of health, a sound, strong body, and being concerned with the affairs of health. So it is from the intelligence of a man, it is from aql, that you are concerned about your health. It is from gratitude to Allah Azza wa Jal that you learn these affairs in order to show your gratitude to Allah Azza wa Jal, and to protect and preserve this favor, this ni'mah, which can only be recognized, which people only tend to see. It's like they say that health is a crown on the head of a healthy person, which no one sees except the diseased person, the sick person. Right? When a person is sick and ill, he's lying in bed, he has a chronic illness, only then does he see the crown that is on the head of every sound, healthy person that is around him. So, this shows the focus in Islam, in the Quran, in the Sunnah, in the Sharia of, upon the issue of health. So now, what are the means, what are the ways that we find in the Sharia? We mentioned 8 or 9 of them, inshallah ta'ala. So, first of them is that Islam encourages personal hygiene. Islam encourages personal hygiene. This is natural to come first because hygiene, cleanliness. Islam is a religion of purity. Islam is a religion of purity. As we shall come to the hadith, that purity, at-tuhur shatrul iman. At-tuhur shatrul iman. Purity is one half of faith. And as the scholars explain, there is purity which is hissi, which is physical material, which is of the body, and there is that which is ma'nawi, that which is in meaning, in concept, which is spiritual, meaning that which relates to the heart of its beliefs, and so on and so forth. And so Islam has given a great concern, an emphatic concern of the cleanliness and hygiene of individuals, of households, of societies, and of all nations. It is focused upon the cleanliness of bodies, and of clothing, and of the environment, and of the house. All of these we see in the Sharia of Islam. And we see Allah Azza wa Jal, He mentions in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ التَّوَّابِينَ وَيُحِبُّ الْمُتَطَهِّرِينَ. Indeed, Allah, He loves those who frequently turn to repentance. And likewise, He loves those who keep themselves pure, keep themselves clean. This is something Allah Azza wa Jal that He loves. And the hadith that we mentioned, at-tuhur shatrul iman, purity is one half of iman. These texts indicate that Islam legislates for the body to be continuously hygienic, continuously pure. For example, we make wudu. We are obliged to make wudu to maintain purity for the prayer. And in fact, we see an encouragement for the believer to maintain the state of wudu. A person preserves the state of wudu, it is a sign of his perfection and completion in faith. Likewise, it has obligated to make ghusl when a person is in a state of janaba after relations. Likewise, after the female has ended the menstrual period, she is required to have a bath, a ghusl. And likewise, postpartum bleeding, after delivery has been made of the child and after the bleeding has stopped again, has obligated the ghusl. And likewise, on the Jum'ah and the Eid, the various days of Eid, we are obligated to have a ghusl. And even when making, when a person is going to make ihram or enter Makkah and do ta'af, it is recommended to make ghusl, to do wudu, and so on and so forth. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Man ightasala yawm al-jum'ah فأحسن غسله وتطهر فأحسن طهوره ولبس من أحسن ثيابه ومس ما كتب الله له من طيب أهله ثم أتى الجمعة ولم يلغ ولم يفرق بين اثنين غفر له ما بينه وبين الجمعة الأخرى." In this hadith, the Messenger he mentions that a person who comes on the day of Jum'ah, he makes ghusl, makes it well, and then he purifies himself in the best way, wears his best garment, and continues and comes to Jum'ah whilst he's dressed well, purified, perfumed, and so on and so forth. He does not speak in vain, does not cause two to separate. All of his sins will be forgiven between that Jum'ah and the next. And so we see that we've been commanded likewise to take good garments, clean, pure garments, and to perfume ourselves, and likewise to look after the places of worship. Look at how Allah Azza wa Jal, He says in the Quran, in Surah Al-A'raf, verse 31, "Ya bani Adam, khudhu zinatakum inda kulli masjidin wa kulu washrabu wa la tusrifu innahu la yuhibbul musrifin." O children of Adam, take your adornment, your beautiful adornment, when you go to every masjid, and eat and drink, and do not go to excess. Indeed, Allah does not love those who go to excess. So here we see in this ayah, Allah Azza wa Jal has mentioned taking beautiful adornment to the masjid. And all of this means obviously that the body is clean and pure, and the thawb is clean and pure. And we see this mentioned also in another ayah, Ya ayyuhal muddathir qum fa'anzir wa rabbaka fakabbir wa thiyabaka fatahhir. With respect to this fourth verse, purify your garment, addressed to the Messenger of Allah, Imam As-Sa'di mentions that one of the meanings of this ayah is purify your clothes, wear clean clothes for the prayer. For the prayer. So we see here in all of these texts, likewise from the hadith which is related by Abu Dawud and Al-Hakim and Al-Mustadrak from Abi Darda, who said that he heard the Messenger of Allah say, إنكم قادمون على إخوانكم فأصلحوا رحالكم وأصلحوا لباسكم حتى تكون كأنكم شامة في الناس فإن الله لا يحب الفحش ولا التفحش. So he says to a people who are approaching, that indeed you are approaching your brothers, so rectify your rihalukum wa aslihu libasakum, and correct and mend your clothing when you come. Meaning come and appear to be presentable in front of the people. So from all of this, likewise, from all of this, we see that there is a focus upon the cleanliness of the body, a cleanliness of the clothing, and likewise a cleanliness of the environment. And this we deduce from the hadith of the Abi Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, who said that the Messenger of Allah he said, Al-imanu bid'un wa sab'una baban فأدناها إماتة الأذى عن الطريق وأرفعها قول لا إله إلا الله. That Iman has 70 odd branches or aspects. The lowest of them is to remove something harmful from the floor, and the highest of them is the statement La ilaha illallah. And so the scholars have deduced from this command here that to remove that which is harmful from the this is a principle in relation to removing that which is harmful in the environment. So a person in where he lives, that which is impure and harmful, that this should be removed from his environment. And from this, obviously, there are other things that we can derive from that. So the first principle then that Islam has come with is that of cleanliness and purity. And in a time when when Muslims were enjoying good health, purity, clean streets, and they were medicinally advanced more so than the other nations. Why? Because they acquired the knowledge and the sciences of those who came before them, and they refined them and they studied them. And at a time when the Muslims were living in cleanliness because of their deen, because of the legislation of Islam, we see that other nations were living in filth and disease and pollution, and many of them gave rise to plagues, and many people being killed as a result of those plagues and diseases. And so this is something that is part and parcel of a Muslim. A Muslim is pure. He's pure in his body. He makes wudu', he makes ghusl, is pure in his appearance. All of these things are required by the Sharia of a Muslim. That's why no one can say about Muslims that they are impure people. It's impossible for someone to say that Muslims are dirty, clean, because this is just not true at all whatsoever, because of the legislation of Islam, what it requires from a Muslim. So the first thing that we see then in Islam is cleanliness and purity. And absence of hygiene is one of the ways by which a person obviously becomes ill. It's one of the roots of disease, transmission and disease occurrence. The second thing that Islam has come with is moderation in food and drink. Moderation in food and drink. Now Islam is a religion of moderation, of wasatiyah, of balance, moderation in everything. We are moderate in our belief, in all aspects of our belief. We are moderate between the Khawarij and the Murji'ah. We are moderate, between the Rafida and the Khawarij, who denigrate the companions, and those who exaggerate in the companions. We have a middle path in between. So in every field, we are moderate in the affair of Al-Qadr, between the Qadariyah and the deniers of Al-Qadr and the Jabariyah. So in our belief, we are moderate. In our worship, we are moderate. We pray and we sleep. We fast and we break the fast. We marry, we have relations. In everything we are moderate. Islam has come with everything which is moderate. And likewise, in terms of food and drink, Islam has come with that which is moderation. So for that reason, we see that moderation in food, in terms of food and drink, Islam encourages moderation. There's no excess, there's no neglect, there is no, the moderation here is in terms of quality, in quality and likewise quantity. And so the principle in this regard is an ayah, a famous ayah in the Quran. And in this ayah, Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, this is in Surah Al-A'raf, Surah 7, verse number 31. And in fact, let me mention to you a story, a context behind this ayah in the Quran. There's a famous Imam from the Salaf by the name of Ali bin Hassan. Ali bin Hassan. And he is an Imam of the Salaf around the 2nd century after Hijrah. And there was a Christian doctor, a Christian physician came to him, and he said, he was trying to boast, he was trying to say, well, how come in your book, in the Quran, we see that there is medicine for the heart, but we do not see any medicine for the body? Why don't we see this in your book in the Quran? And so Ali bin Hassan, he said, Ali bin Hassan, he basically said to this Christian, and this was in the time of Harun al-Rashid. He used to have a very clever, very smart physician, a doctor who was a Christian. And he said to Ali bin Hassan, there is not in your book anything of the knowledge of medicine. Why is there nothing in your book to do with medicine? Whereas we know that medicine, that knowledge is of two types, knowledge of the religion and knowledge of bodies. How come we don't find anything in your book to do with the knowledge of the bodies? And so Ali bin Hassan said to him that indeed Allah has combined all of medicine. Allah has combined all of medicine in half of a verse in the Quran. Not even one verse. In half of a verse in the Quran. And this verse is the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا إِنَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُسْرِفِينَ. Eat and drink and do not go into excess. Meaning eat and drink in moderation. Indeed, Allah loves not those who go into excess. So here now, if you really think and reflect upon this principle, this verse is a combination of all of medicine in one verse. All of medicine comes down to the issue of moderation in food and drink. And in fact, this is supported by hadith in which the Messenger of Allah he mentions, is mentioned by Ibn Rajab, narrated through Miqdam bin Ma'di Karib, who says, I heard the Messenger of Allah say, the son of Adam does not fill a container worse, more evil than his belly, than his stomach. It is sufficient for the son of Adam to keep his back upright, that he take enough morsels of food to keep his back straight. So let him eat a third for his food, or a third for his food in his stomach, a third for his drink, and a third to allow him to keep breathing. A third food, a third drink, and the rest to allow him to continue breathing. Now, commenting upon this, Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions, this hadith constitutes a comprehensive principle for all of the principles of medicine. And it has been reported that Ibn Abi Masawi, the physician, when he read this hadith in the book of Abi Khaythama, he said, if the people acted upon these words, they would be free of all of the diseases and ailments in the clinics. So they'd be free from all of the diseases and ailments, and the clinics and pharmacies would be shut down. And then he said, that Ibn Rajab continues and he says, indeed he, meaning Ibn Abi Masawayh, said this because the origin of all disease is basically an improper process in the gut, in the lower gut, or what they call dysbiosis, incomplete, improper digestion of the food. And Al-Harith bin Kalada, the physician of the Arabs, he said, precaution in the diet is the chief part of medicinal treatment, and this dysbiosis is the chief cause of disease. And he brings a statement from Ibrahim bin Adham, who said, whoever controls his stomach, whoever masters his stomach, masters his religion. And whoever reigns control over his hunger will reign control over the righteous characteristics. This is an amazing statement. That whoever controls his stomach will master his religion. And whoever controls his hunger will reign control over the righteous characteristics. Meaning the one who is unable to control his hunger, he will never be able to develop the righteous characteristics. Think about it, it makes sense. Because if you cannot control the baser lower desires and have the strength and the resolve to control those lower basic instinctive desires, then how on earth are you going to develop the other characters, the noble lofty characters? And if you are unable to master your stomach, how are you going to master your religion? Right? So, these things are basically tied. So the issue of health and disease and righteousness, you see how the Salaf made a connection between all of these things by way of this. By way of this. And in fact, Ibn Rajab, if you return back to his Jami'ul Ulum al-Hikam, in his explanation of this hadith, is right towards the end, because he mentions An-Nawawi's 40 hadith, then he mentions another 10 on top. And this hadith is one of those, and within that explanation, he mentions many statements of the Salaf that speak about the importance of taking less food, and how taking less food is a means of preserving your aql, your intellect, and likewise your age and your faculties. There are some statements in that regard, and so you can refer back to that. Now, coming back to this issue of moderation in food and drink, even now you see there is research now, there are people are bringing, and in fact one particular man, he's written a book on fasting in which he speaks about the 5-2 rule, that you eat normally for 5 days and you fast for 2 days. And he specifically mentions the practice of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ of fasting on Mondays and Thursdays. Right? He makes a mention of this in his book. And so the general point being here that controlling your food, controlling your intake of food and drink, controlling your hunger, and limiting the amount of calories you take is a means of good health, first and foremost, and secondly, of increasing your lifespan. Increasing your lifespan. And an increase in your lifespan obviously also means that you are protecting and preserving your faculties. Now, I have some other statements here as well from Ibn Al-Qayyim and others. I'll very quickly summarize some of these statements. Ibn Al-Qayyim says illnesses are of two types. So he's speaking here about the material illnesses. Material illnesses arise when there becomes a point of excess in the body where the natural functions are unable to occur in the normal, optimal way. Right? So in other words, you consume in a way that puts a strain, for example, on your liver, on your kidneys, on your various organs. That in turn does not allow the natural functions to occur at the optimum level. Now when this continues, this is the reason behind the occurrence of disease, and he says these are the majority of illnesses. And then he continues and he says this occurs by consuming more food on top of food that previously has not been properly digested. So you eat, and then you eat on top of that, and you eat food which is of little nutritional value, and by indulging in all sorts of different foods which are complex in their composition. So when a person makes it a habit to consume in this way, they will cause them various diseases, some of which will come slowly, some of which will come swiftly. But as for when he is moderate in his eating, takes only what he needs, he keeps a balance of quantity and quality, then the body benefits more from this than it does from a large amount of food. So from this statement we gather many points. The majority of illnesses are related to improper dietary habits. Specifically, taking excess food on top of food that is still not being properly digested. Eating in excess, more than what the body needs. Taking food that has little nutritional value. That you eat food that is not really nutritious. And that's a lot of the food that we eat today is not really nutritious. And having meals that comprise of lots of complex, varied, different types of rich types of foods. So when a person makes this a habit, then obviously these are the diseases of civilization, of towns and cities. They are complex diseases, which come in a slow fashion. And these are diseases like diabetes and heart disease and things of that nature because of abuses in the diet. So a lot of the illnesses arise as a result of food and drink. Now I want to give you an analogy, which is I like this analogy because it is very it allows you to think carefully about how you eat and what you eat. And this analogy is basically, in fact, it is true scientifically and by way of the study of the body's biochemistry, which is that every time you eat a meal, your body has to use some of its inherent capacities and resources to consume that food. And that contributes to your death, right? So meaning, this is like you can't escape death, right? Everything that you take into your body, whilst it keeps you alive on the small scale of time, in the large scale of time, it pushes you further towards death, right? So the analogy that I like to give, in fact, this is all to do with the enzymes in your body. Your body, when you are born, there is, and we believe this from Al-Qada wal-Qadar, that the lifespan of every individual is written, and all of his bodily resources and inherent capacities are already determined at birth, right? So when you are born, you have, let's call this, you have a bank account. In your bank account, there are enzymes. Enzymes are really the key elements in your body. The enzymes are the ones that modulate and regulate and facilitate and speed up all of the reactions in your body. Without enzymes, there is no life, right? So your vision, every motion of the hand, the brain that's functioning, every single thing that is happening in the cell, in every individual cell, is being mediated by way of enzymes, right? So when you are born, you are given your bank account of enzymes. Now, as you proceed to live your life, you will have to make withdrawals from your bank account in order to make your body do what it is doing. So over a lifetime, these enzymes continue to be withdrawn. And there will come a point where, because your bank account has been emptied, the basic elements, the basic functions of the body will stop and cease to function. So for example, the joints in your body will not work as they used to. Your vision will become impaired. Your hearing will become impaired, right? Your organs will not function in the right way. So basically your body begins to whatever. Now all of this is to do with the withdrawing from your bank account, right? In order to, make the body do what it's supposed to do. Now, you can withdraw carefully, or make sure that you're not withdrawing anything. And all of this is based upon how and what you eat and drink. This is why, if you look into those cultures and civilizations who are the most healthy and who live the longest, you will see certain characteristics in their diets. And in their diets, what they do is that they eat certain foods which are already digested. They are pre-digested. In other words, when you consume that food, your body does not have to do anything to break it down to digest it. Meaning, your body is not having to withdraw from the bank account, right? Rather, the food has already come pre-digested, right? So, for example, things like sour milk, laban, which is left to ferment and become acidic. It breaks down, the bacteria break it down, and it's basically pre-digested. You drink it, your body has to do next to nothing, right? Likewise, certain foods like sauerkraut, like the sour cabbage or the fermented cabbage, which you find in certain civilizations, they make it part and parcel of their diet, right? The good bacteria, lactic acid bacteria, breaks down everything. It creates B vitamins and so on and so forth. Everything is already digested. So the point being here is that the way that you prepare foods is such that when you consume these foods, your body is doing next to nothing. This means that your enzyme bank account is always topped up because you're not making withdrawals, right? And as you grow older and older and older, there will be enough enzymes to take care of your vision, for example, your hearing, or whatever else. Now, on the other hand, if you are eating foods which are, which you need to take maybe an overdraft or something, you have to go to an overdraft of enzymes, like you eat fried food. Fried food is very hard to digest, and you're gonna have to make lots of withdrawals to consume to digest a fried fish and chips, for example, or a hefty steak, for example, a huge hefty steak that your enzymes now have to be used. So what happens is, as an emergency, your body says, you know what, I need some proteases, lipases, amylases. Where can I get them? From other parts of the body. So the troops have to come from other parts of the body. And so if you make this a constant practice, what's going to happen is, basically you are consuming yourself, you are making withdrawals from your bank account, and you will die earlier, you will live for less, and your faculties will deteriorate at a quicker pace, right? So eating in moderation. So remember, there's many things that I don't want you to miss here. Eating in moderation has many things underneath it. When you eat in moderation, you have to be eating nutritious food. You can't just be eating non-nutritious food, because your body has needs. It needs nutrition. You eat in moderation. You eat less, right? You don't eat to the fill. This will give you a longer life. But you eat that which is nutritious. At the same time, the method you use to cook the food, that's why you will see that the civilizations and nations that have good health and live the longest, they have certain methods by which they prepare food. That food is always at the closest stage to being natural. And the cooking methods are non-harsh and very simple and very moderate, right? Like either they are fermented foods, either they are lightly steamed, and so the food that you are eating is kept at the closest stage as it is. Unlike, for example, when you see that, sometimes you have a curry and you've just cooked the chicken to death. You've just kept it on the oven and just heated it and heated it and heated it and heated it, and where's all the benefit gone in that? Or like the spinach, you make the spinach. You don't take it naturally, but you just make, like the Asians do, they make saag with it, and they just kill all the nutrition that's in it by just keeping on the heat for hours and hours and hours and hours and whatever else. So the point being that how you prepare the food is also an art and a skill. It is a lost art and a lost skill, right? How do you prepare different types of foods in the most healthy manner? to gain all of the benefits out of that food. That in itself is something that you have to study and you have to look at as well. So I mean, there are many more things that can be said about this, and we don't really have much time, to be honest. So we'll conclude that there. The second element then that Islam has given attention to is the issue of moderation in food and drink. And beneath this, there are so many things that a person can study and look at. So this is just a basic indication for you to pursue further. So quality of food and in a certain moderate quantity. Before I forget as well, that obviously in a modern context, we see that most foods, we are losing nutrients in the foods because of large-scale farming methods. We see that the minerals are no longer in the soil anymore because of decades and decades and decades of industrial farming. So it is inevitable that a person has to take supplements in order to make up for the deficiencies in terms of nutrition. And so for that reason, vital elements like selenium, for example, vitamin D, which underlie hundreds of processes in the body, these are things which a person can look at and, as a means of supplementing a good, nutritious diet in order to maintain a healthy body. So I'll mention those things towards the end, inshallah ta'ala. But just to move on with this, I have plenty more. You'll have to have patience with me, inshallah, because I know we've been speaking for an hour and 20 minutes. But we have 5-6 more things to mention, which all of which are important. So the third thing, point number 3 that we find in the Sharia is the recommendation of physical exercise. Physical exercise, and really these are simple things, but they are really behind the cause of disease, right? Lack of cleanliness, lack of hygiene. You didn't wash your hand or something and you caught an infection or something. Improper dietary habits. Not having any exercise, sitting around. When these take place over years and years and years and years, disease sets in, and then you're thinking, where did this disease come from? These might be simple things, but they are behind a lot of disease condition. So the Sharia has come with recommendation of physical activity, and this is from numerous angles. The Sharia has come to make the bodies strong, the intellect strong, and it wants a person's offspring, the children, to be strong as well, and for their intellects to be strong. And this occurs because in fact, one of the principles that we see in the studies of genes and environment is that everything you do affects your genes, right? So the cell and the genes and external factors and the actions that you perform, they're constantly rewriting your genes, or they are switching genes on and off, right? So whatever activities you engage in, that is having an effect on your genes, and that will then be passed on to your children, right? So there is an influence and an effect on your offspring. So therefore, if you want your children to be strong physically, in terms of health, in terms of mentally, in terms of intellect, and so on and so forth, then all of these elements have to be incorporated. So exercise is something that is recommended, encouraged, because it affects a person's body, his intellect, manners, the soul, the spiritual elements. And in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal praises Himself. We see these are qualities. Allah says in the Quran, ذُو الْقُوَّةِ الْمَتِينَ, that Allah is one who is strong, is powerful. And just like there are many of these attributes of Allah Azza wa Jal, like wisdom and mercy and ilm and so on and so forth, and likewise we are encouraged that these are also from the perfection of a human, that we have these attributes, that we are wise, that we are merciful, that we have ilm, that we are strong. And likewise we see in the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, al-mu'minu al-qawi khayrun wa ahabbu ila Allah min al-mu'min al-da'if. The strong believer is more beloved, is better and more beloved to Allah than the weak believer, to the end of the hadith. And likewise we see that Anas bin Malik, who said that Abu Talha used to play with the Messenger of Allah sallallahu with a shield. They used to play and practice with each other using the shield. The shield as a, and Abu Talha used to be good as an archer. And when he used to fire the arrows through his bow, the Prophet ﷺ would watch over him and see where the arrow would fall. As mentioned by Al-Bukhari. And so likewise, Aisha radiallahu anha said, سابقت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فسبقته فلما حملت من اللحم سابقني فسبقني فقال يا عائشة هذه بتلك. She said that I raced with the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم and I beat him, meaning when she was younger. And then when I gained some weight, he gave me a race and he beat me. And so then he said, this is for that one. And so here then, we see that there are certain activities. We see in the Sharia likewise recommendation of things like swimming and archery and horse riding and things like wrestling, for example. All of these are practical, useful types of exercise. So notice that this exercise that is being recommended is not vain exercise. It is useful, practical, beneficial exercise which has tangible benefit. And so this is something that we should be encouraged to, and encourage our children, especially in this age of couch potatoes in a factory. Because the modern lifestyle is one which produces couch potatoes, meaning people just sat around all day, handheld device or doing whatever else, just sat around, lazing around, and they become couch potatoes, sitting around. And this has a negative impact upon a person's health and his offspring. Because as we said, your actions switch off genes and switch on genes, right? It's a dynamic process. And then this is passed on to your children. And so therefore, all of these things that we are speaking of here, physical exercise is something that, and especially these types of things which are practical and benefit, then a person should be encouraged. You should encourage their children to go outdoors, to see, rivers, trees, animals, to walk, to hike, to, all these things which are beneficial. You should be encouraged to do that on a regular basis. So that's number 3. Number 4 is that you must give your body the right that it has upon you. You must give your body the right that it has upon you, which is rest. Rest. And in Islam, the body has emphasized, in Islam, the body has been given, the right of the body has been given an emphasis. The body is an amana. You are a soul to whom a body has been entrusted. Allah puts you were created as a soul first, then He put you in a body. Every person has a different type of body. That body is an amana that is upon your shoulders. Your physical body is an amana. Remember, your soul was created first, right? And so your body is just something. Your body is unique to you. Allah Azza wa Jal could have given you any body. So this specific body which He gave you, which is unique to you, is an amana upon you. And you have to fulfill the obligation in the sense that you give it its the due nutrition, sufficient sleep, sufficient rest, sufficient clothing, which is clean, a sufficient place to live, and all the other things which follow on from that, such as marriage and marital relations in the halal way, and treating it when necessary, and making beneficial use of all of the halal things which Allah has allowed and which are customary to one's society and culture and so on and so forth, in agreement with the Shia, in agreement with the Sharia of Allah Azza wa Jal, then all of this is something which is part and parcel of the right of the body. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says in the Quran, وَابْتَغِ فِيمَا آتَاكَ اللَّهُ الدَّارَ الْآخِرَةِ وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, pursue from that which Allah has given you the abode of the hereafter. So whatever means Allah has given you of wealth and other things, use it to pursue and seek the abode of the hereafter. But then He said, وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا, but do not forget your share of the world. Ali bin Abi Talib radiallahu anhu said regarding this ayah as mentioned by Al-Baghawi, لا تنسى صحتك وقوتك وثيابك أو وشبابك. I'm not sure what must have miswritten the quote. But the meaning here then is, do not forget your health and your strength and your youth, if I've copied it rightly. So the point being the health here, do not forget your health. وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا. From that is your health. And so from that is the right of the body. And we see the indicated when the Prophet ﷺ said to Amr bin al-As, who used to engage himself in worship and fasting and praying, he said, Sum wa afdir wa qum wa nam. He said, fast and break your fast. Stand in prayer and sleep. For indeed your body has a right upon you, and your eye has a right upon you. So the body meaning fast and then break your fast because your body has a right. And the eye meaning pray and then sleep at night as well because your eye, your body has a right upon you. And likewise, the Messenger of Allah he said, it is not desirable for a Muslim that he humiliate himself. لا ينبغي لمسلم أن يذل نفسه. It was said, how does a believer humiliate himself? He said, يتعرض من البلاء ما لا يطيق. Meaning that a believer puts himself in a situation that he's not really capable of doing. Meaning here that do not put yourself in a situation that's going to be burdensome upon you for no reason. It's going to be burdensome upon your body. It's going to give you stress. It's going to give you grief. A believer does not humiliate himself in this way by putting himself in situations that are detrimental to him. And so likewise, the jism, the body, giving the body sufficient rest, in terms of it is by way of the night. There are many ayat in the Quran which establish that the night is a time of rest and serenity and giving the body its rest. By way of example, وَالَّذِي جَعَلَ لَكُمُ اللَّيْلَ لِتَسْكُنُوا فِيهِ وَالنَّهَارَ مُبْصِرًا إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَةٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَسْمَعُونَ. That Allah is the one who made for you the night as a place of repose. Likewise, هُوَ الَّذِي جَعَلَ لَكُمُ اللَّيْلَ لِبَاسًا وَالنَّوْمَ سُبَاتًا وَجَعَلَ النَّهَارَ نُشُورًا. He's the one who made for you the night as a clothing, and the night as a clothing, and sleep as a rest, and made for you the day as a resurrection. Meaning that you awake after sleep, and everything else we see grows in the daytime by way of the air and the sun, the light, and whatever else, and by night time it stops. Right? So the day is like a type of resurrection. And there are other ayat in the Quran which is similar. The point being that nighttime is a time of rest. So your body has a right upon you that you give it that rest. Again, these are things that most people might not connect to disease, but they really do have an impact upon disease. When you make abuses in these affairs, over time they build up and they provide an environment in which disease can easily settle in. So these things are important. If you live your life according to the Sunnah, this is the prophetic medicine. If you live your life like this, you will be free of disease and you will not get complex disease. You will get simple diseases which go away after a day or 2 days, which are not chronic. Right? So this is the nature of the prophetic medicine. Right? So fifth element is that you protect your house, your environment from things which cause disease, from at-talawwuth, things which are decay, which are putrid, which are, things like this. So we see in the legislation of Islam that the emphasis has been on the health of the individual and the society, and likewise of the masakin, of the places of abode, and the courtyards, and the ways, and the paths, and everything basically to do with the environment. Abu Dhar, he said, and the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam who said, عُرِضَتْ عَلِيَّ أَعْمَالُ أُمَّتِي حَسَنُهَا وَسَيِّئُهَا فوجدت في محاسن أعمالها الأذى يماط عن الطريق ووجدت في مساوي أعمالها النخاعة تكون في المسجد لا تدفن. So basically he says that the good deeds of my nation were presented to me and the evil deeds of my nation were presented to me, and I found that from the good deeds of my nation was that they remove that which is harmful from the path, and from the evil deeds, that which I found to be from the evil deeds, is spitting of phlegm, which is found in the masjid and which is not buried. Right? So from this hadith we see a general principle in relation to the cleanliness of the roadways and the pathways, and the absence of harmful things being left in the environment. Likewise, this principle is also taken from the hadith in which the Messenger of Allah, he said, غَطُوا الْإِنَاءَ وَأَوْكِئُوا السِّقَاءَ فَإِنَّ فِي السَّنَةِ لَيْلَةً يَنْزِلُ فِيهَا وَبَاءٌ لَا يَمُرُّ بِإِنَاءٍ لَمْ يُغَطْ وَلَا سِقَاءٍ لَمْ يُعْكَ إِلَّا وَقَعَ فِيهِ مِنْ ذَلِكَ الْوَبَاءِ. He said, tighten your pots or seal your pots and tie your drinking water skins. For indeed in a year there is a night when the waba, meaning a disease, descends, and it does not pass by any vessel, any empty vessel, or any water skin which is open, except that it enters into that. Right? So again, this is an indication of, like in the house when you have food and things like that, that you keep everything closed. Likewise, the preservation of the air, the principle of preservation of the air, we see in the hadith that the Messenger of Allah, of Ibn Abbas, that the Messenger of Allah, he prohibited from breathing into a vessel or into a vessel and blowing onto it. Again, the principle derived from this is, is to do with the environment and the cleanliness of the environment and basic hygiene. And likewise with water, we are prohibited from urinating in still water. Likewise, we are prohibited from relieving ourselves in the three places, which is, for example, in shade and on a path and in the side of a water. In the side of water. These are places where people tend to congregate to get shade, or they travel, or they come by. And in these areas we are prohibited from relieving ourselves. Why? Again, this is a part and parcel of the environment, of protecting the environment. So, from all of this, we gather a general principle of ensuring that the environment is clean. That in your house, the environment is clean. So, there are many things which come under this. You keep the air clean, you use bukhur, for example, incense, for example, and whatever other steps that are related from this. It's for you to basically look at the details. Then number 6 is that we see that the Sharia has prohibited certain foods and drinks which are inherently harmful. So we see that in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, وَيُحِلُّ لَهُمُ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَيُحَرِّمُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْخَبَائِثِ. That Allah Azza wa Jal has made lawful for you the tayyibat, the wholesome pure things, and He has prohibited for you the khaba'ith, the filthy evil things. Now, there's an important point of aqidah we can mention here which will be beneficial based upon this ayah, which is that there's a subject in the issue of aqidah which is very, very important. It's called at-tahseen wa-taqbih. At-tahseen wa-taqbih. This issue is to do with the question as to, can the intellect, can it determine what is good and beneficial and what is harmful? Right? Can it know what is hasan, good, and qabih, what is evil? Can the intellect do that? Or is it the case that only revelation can tell us that? Right? This is a question on top of which there are many other issues of belief which are connected to. For example, the issue of Al-Qada wal-Qadar and all of the debates to do with Al-Qada wal-Qadar, they are tied to this issue of At-Tahseen and At-Taqbih. Now, how is this connected to our point here? The point is here that here in this ayah, Allah has mentioned At-Tayyibat and Al-Khaba'ith. So in the Sharia, we accept that things are inherently, that the concept of harm and evil, that it inherently exists in things. And the concept of wholesomeness, something being tayyib, pure, wholesome, beneficial, overwhelmingly beneficial, that these are inherent qualities of things. That's why there are certain things which are categorically forbidden to Muslims. Why? Because inherently there is khubth, there is evil in it, either physically or in terms of the consequences, right? So for example, we are prohibited from everything which intoxicates, every intoxicant. We are prohibited, like drugs, intoxications, things like that. We are prohibited from certain other things, like for example, al-maisir, which are games of chance, al-ansab, those things which are sacrificed to other than Allah, al-azlam, divining through arrows. All of these are rijsun min amal shaytan fajtanibuhu la'allakum tuflihun. That we are prohibited from all of these. They are rich, they are filthy, they are evil from the action of shaitan. We are prohibited al-khamr, ittaqul khamr fa innaha ummul khaba'ith. Fear intoxicants because it is the mother of all khaba'ith. Khamr itself leads to many other evils. Likewise the flesh of pig. Likewise dead animals. Blood, consuming blood. Animals which have fangs and claws, we have prohibited from them. Animals which eat from the filthy things. Animals which eat filthy things, like the swine, for example, and other types of animals that go and eat filth. All of these we are prohibited from consuming those things because they are from the khaba'ith. They are from the khaba'ith. They are inherently evil and corrupt. And so the reason why I mention this thing about at-tahseen wa taqbih is because likewise, not only physical things in the Sharia like food and drink has been declared to be either tayyib or khabith, then likewise actions, they have the same thing as well. Actions can be hasan, they can be qabih, they can be good and wholesome, they can be violent, impure and harmful. And that's why, for example, we know that zina is khubth and qabih, and we know that, for example, there are actions which are hasan, which are beneficial, right? This is the basis of morality. To us, when we look at everything in Allah's creation, Allah has told us, this is khabith, this is tayyib, this is hasan, this is qabih, right? So human actions have consequences. That's why, for example, there are certain actions we can never accept, right? And certain actions we consider to be halal, tayyib, certain actions we consider to be haram and khabith, right? Because actions have consequences as well. They have inherent properties to them, right? Because they affect and influence other things. So the Sharia has come, made halal everything which is wholesome, and made haram everything which is khabith and harmful, right? So everything that we look at in the Sharia, that it allows marriage and food and drink and clothing and everything, then it is halal and tayyib. But whatever it prohibits, it is because it is khabith, it is qabih, it is harmful overwhelmingly to most of society, so therefore it has been prohibited, right? So the issue with tahseen and taqbih basically comes to this. Our position in between the Mu'tazila and other than them is that we believe that the intellect can know that something is khabith and hasan, is qabih and hasan, because things have inherent qualities and actions have inherent qualities. So it's possible for a human to know that which is right and wrong and harmful and beneficial. But it is only when revelation comes and affirms that that he will then be punished or rewarded. Right? Do you understand? This is how we believe as Ahlul Sunnah. That yes, the intellect can work out that this is inherently wrong, like stealing is wrong, right? Or that charity is good. We can know that by intellect. And but when does responsibility arise? It is when the revelation has come. And so this principle really is a principle of belief. It relates to the disputes about this issue. I wanted to mention it here because of its importance. Anyway, the halal and the haram is based upon that which is tayyib and that which is khabith. The whole sharia is founded upon that. And so from the issue of health is that the sharia has prohibited that which is khabith from certain foods and drinks which bring about health. Ill health, which bring about harm to health, disease, alcohol. You see it all the time in the newspapers. It is a burden on the society's economy. It is a harm to health. And then all the other things that you see, intoxicants, drugs, certain types of meat, certain types of the swine, whatever else, all of these are connected to disease. So we come to the next issue, which is protecting oneself from disease, keeping away from what we would call today infectious disease. There are certain commands in the Sharia. I'll mention them very quickly. The hadith of Abu Salama from Abu Hurairah, who said that he heard the Messenger of Allah say, "Let not one of you pass a sick camel by a healthy camel." And he also said in a hadith, when you hear إِذَا سَمِعْتُمْ بِالطَّاعُونِ بِأَرْضٍ, when you hear of a plague which is broken out in a land, do not enter it. And if it befalls when you are in the land, do not leave the land. Right? If a disease arises in a land, don't go to it. And if you are in a land where disease has broken, do not leave it. And he also said, فِرَّ مِنَ الْمَجْذُومِ فِرَارَكَ مِنَ الْأَسَدِ. Flee from a leper, min al-majzoom, firaraka min al-asad, like you would flee from a lion. And there are many similar hadith in this regard. Now, it's important that we understand this thing here about the issue of what is called infectious disease. Ibn Hajar has a book on this topic. He wrote on this topic because in Egypt, in the 8th, 9th centuries, there were a number of plagues, waves of plagues which came. So he wrote this book to speak about the topic of disease and plagues. And he mentions these ahadith. And what he explains here, he mentions from the scholars and the commentators, and he says that what is really meant by these ahadith, and he mentions the hadith, La adwa, there is no such thing as an infectious disease. Wala tiyara, wala hama, wala safar, to the end. And so in commenting about this hadith, basically he says that the reason why a person has been prohibited from entering into a land where a disease has broken out, or from leaving a land where a disease has broken out, is not because of the issue of the disease, but because of protecting his iman, of protecting his tawheed. Why? Because if a person went to a land where a disease had broken out and he caught the disease, he may have thought that the disease was infectious, and had he not come, he would have not got the disease. And vice versa if he'd left a land where a disease had broken out. Right? So the point being that the whole aim behind this prohibition is so that he does not wrongly believe in adwa. Adwa meaning that a disease is somehow infectious in its own right and is able to infect people outside of the qada and qadr of Allah Azza wa Jal. Right? Because this was a belief that the people would have. So the wisdom, as Ibn Hajar explains by quoting from other scholars, is to preserve and protect a person's iman, in that he does not start believing in adwa, and that he knows that all things are by the qada and qadr of Allah Azza wa Jal. And that's why Ibn Hajar himself, he mentions that where he was in Egypt, there would be a house where one person had the plague and his family would sleep next to him, attend to him, look after him, give him food, give him drink, breathe the same air as him, and never get the disease. Never get the disease. How can this disease then be said to be infectious? Right? So it shows that the asbab, the ways and the means by which a person gets the disease are in the control of Allah Azza wa Jal. Right? And and that's why in a modern context, when they say today that a virus is passing around and this and whatever, it's not the virus which is causing the disease. It's not just the virus. There are other asbab, there are other factors. And that's why you see many people get the disease, they catch the flu, they catch the cold, other people don't get the cold. It's got nothing to do with the virus. The virus is one small element, and there are many other factors, and Allah Azza wa Jal, He's in control of them all. It's like you can't have a plant without the seed or the soil. You can't have the soil by itself, but you can't have the seed by itself. So the virus might be a seed, but if the environment is not present in an individual, then he won't get the disease. And each person varies. Right? So we do not believe in the concept of a disease being infectious in and of itself. Right? Rather, there are other factors which are in the control of Allah Azza wa Jal. And so this is how we look at the issue of disease. But the point coming back to this issue is that another thing that we take from these hadith is that taking precautions is something that is permissible. Right? So if someone has a disease, we know that interaction is one of the means by which a disease can be transferred, should Allah allow the other factors to take place as well, to be present as well. Right? And so therefore to take precaution is something which is permissible in the Sharia. So therefore, if someone has a disease and you don't want to catch the disease, it's fine for you if you want to keep away, that's fine, it's permissible. But also we see there are other hadith where the Messenger he would eat with a leper. And so the scholars try to reconcile between, well, how come in the hadith he said, flee from the leper as you would flee from a lion, but on the other hand he sat eating with a leper. And so the scholars reconcile these by saying, well, you can make tawakkul upon Allah Azza wa Jal, because disease is in the control of Allah Azza wa Jal. Nothing will come to you except what Allah has written to you. And so those who have strong iman and tawakkul in Allah, they can do this. And if you feel that you don't want to, you want to keep away, you can do that as well. That's now taking the asbab and the ways and means. Right? So they reconcile all of these texts in this manner. So the point being that we take from this is that a person can take precaution from, falling into from catching a disease, but these texts in the Sharia have something more than the obvious medicinal thing, which is that they protect a person's iman, so that you don't think that if you went somewhere and you caught the disease, you start thinking, if only it hadn't come, I would not have caught the disease. Because then this word of if is something that opens the door to shaitan. And then it starts making you have bad thoughts. Right? So this is to protect your belief. If you hadn't gone, you might have still caught the disease. Right? So this is point number 7, and we finish with point number 8, which is that we find, which is also important, is preserving and protecting the health that relates to the soul and the mind. The soul and the mind. We've spoken a lot about the body. Right? There is the heart, which is not our topic today. There is the body. Then there is the soul, and there is the mind or the intellect. All of these are connected. All of these are connected. Even, we know that Islamically there is a connection between the soul and the heart and the body and the intellect. When we read the statements of the scholars like Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, ibn Al-Qayyim, we see that they speak on the basis of this connection. And even in terms of the knowledge that we have today, there's a connection between the heart and the mind and the body and the faculty of reflection and emotions. All of these are basically connected. And that's why you see there are certain diseases which arise, and they arise because of psychological, emotional reasons. There are many ailments of the gut, for example, irritable bowel disease, problems with the gut, and they are psychological and emotional in their origins. right? You can be treated with all the drugs and whatever else you want, but the underlying problem is actually psychological, right? So the state of mind and things like anxiety, stress, grief, and so on and so forth, they actually have an effect on your health. And so maintaining this element of having a sound, serene mind, your soul is sound, and your aql, your intellect, you nurture your intellect. All of this is part and parcel of keeping the health, of the body in good shape. So from the elements that relate to this aspect of psychological health and spiritual health, we see examples or indications of this in the Sharia. By way of example, the Prophet ﷺ would be surprised by something which we refer to as at-tafa'ul. At-tafa'ul, the best way that we can really explain this is to be optimistic, right? To always have a positive outlook on things, to anticipate something good, to anticipate something positive. If you have this attitude and you have this mentality, you will be saved from illnesses and diseases, because your mind is in such a psychological state that it always sees the positive and anticipates positive things. Whereas if you're always negative, right, it puts your mind or your body into a state, like a psychological state, that makes it prone to disease. So an indication of this in the Sharia is where Qatada, he said that he heard Anas radiallahu anhu say, indeed the Messenger of Allah, he said, قال لا عدوى ولا طيرة ويعجبني الفعل. He said there is no such thing as adwa, as the concept of an infectious disease in its own right, and nor is there any tiyara, this belief in these omens where the birds flies over you and it goes in a direction, it means something bad's going to happen. This thing doesn't exist. It's not real, it's not true. But al-fa'al is something that really surprises me. And so I said, what is al-fa'al? Al-fa'al here is like a good omen. And he said, it is al-kalimatu tayyibah. Al-kalimatu tayyibah. It is a good word, a positive word. What is being referred to here is basically, it's like when you create optimism, when you create good hopes, when you use speech that basically puts good hopes in people. You say positive things to your children, right? This is what is meant by al-fa'al, right? Optimism, good positive words, encouragement. So basically you create a character, a personality that always sees things positively, always has good anticipations, always had an optimal, is optimistic in his or her outlook towards things, right? Not negative. This is what is actually meant here. And an example of this, an illustration of this, is the hadith in which Khabbab bin al-Arrat, he complained and he said that we complained to the Messenger of Allah about the hardship that would come to us from the mushrikun. And so the Messenger of Allah, he told him about the people who would come before, and how they would be put into a pit that was dug for them, and a saw would be put on their heads and they would be sawn in half, and they still would not renounce their religion. And he said, indeed you are a hasty people. So here the intent here is to create like a positive, optimistic type of feeling in a person, right? To make him be positive instead of negative, to be anticipate goodness and rather than be negative. And so this is the kind of thing that we are talking about. And in a way also, if we think about this, there's when you are optimistic and happy and you think positively of things, there's something that the doctors today they speak about called the placebo effect. They call it the placebo effect. It means that you give someone a medicine which is really just water or a sugar pill, right? And you tell them, yes, this you'll be fine, you'll be cured. And then they give a control, another group, actual medicine, and they find that the group which has the placebo, which wasn't given any real medicine, they actually have a positive effect as well. So how can this make sense? They were not given the actual therapeutic the element. And so this comes down to what this is what they call the placebo effect. And really what they do is they use it to discount, right? This is where the experiments are designed. But in reality, it is an inherent faculty in the body by which bodies are healed. Ibn Taymiyyah mentions this. In fact, Ibn Taymiyyah mentions this in the context of, he was asked a question by someone who said that the doctors are telling me that only alcohol or wine or the flesh of the pig are going to cure this particular disease. And so Ibn Taymiyyah responded and said, whoever says that any specific illness can only be cured by this specific thing, by way of habit, by way of custom, then this is an ignoramus, who does not know medicine, let alone, who does not know what Allah revealed, who does not know Allah and His Messenger, let alone knowing medicine itself. And then he expands and he says, because cure is not in any one thing habitually. Rather, it is in many things. It can be in the Quran. It can be in medicinal treatment. It can be in the inherent faculties and strengths and abilities of the body itself. It can be in so many things. And so here, the whole discussion we are having here of being optimistic and being positive and saying good words and things like that, all of these do have a tangible effect on a person being cured of a disease, right? And so this is connected to this issue of optimism and being in a good psychological frame and a good psychological mind. And so all of this is part and parcel of basically good health, the mental, psychological elements of that as well. So these are 8. From that we can see the beauty of the Sharia of Islam and how it has come with the most complete and perfect of guidance. In fact, I don't have time to read from the statements of Ibn Al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala. He says his medicine of the messenger, I'll mention it briefly, is not like the medicine of the physicians. For the medicine of the Prophet is certain, definitive, emanating from divine revelation, the lantern of prophethood and perfection of reason. As for the medicine of others, most of it is conjecture, presumption and experimentation. Then he goes on to mention many other things as well. The point being here then is health is a lifestyle choice, right? Depending on what lifestyle you want to live will determine the types of diseases you will get. If you want to follow the medicine of the Prophet ﷺ, then you need to live your life in accordance with what we've seen in terms of these guidelines. If you live that life, if you live and you choose that lifestyle, then your diseases will be very simple, very short-lived, and they will be cured by the simplest of treatments, because that is from the way of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So really, it's a lifestyle choice. You have to understand this point, that you might think, why are the only simple cures in the Sunnah? Why don't we see all these sophisticated? And that's because the type of life you live will determine the types of diseases you get, right? So if you want to live your life opposed to these principles and you abuse yourself and your body in your diet and lifestyle, and you develop diabetes and cancer and heart disease and so on and so forth, then you say, well, how can I treat this with a prophetic medicine? Well, hang on, this is not right, because the prophetic medicine wasn't made for people like you. It was made for people who follow the prophetic guidance all around. In fact, let me. This is beautiful. I didn't want to really miss this from Ibn Al-Qayyim. This is important for us to get this point. If I can find where it is. Basically, the point Ibn Al-Qayyim makes is that he makes an analogy between the Quran, that the Quran can only heal a certain type of heart, the heart of the believer. It is shifa for the heart of the believer. The Quran will not cure the heart of a hypocrite. The heart of a munafiq cannot be cured by the Quran, even though the Quran is a shifa, it is a healing for that which is in the chests. And then he analogizes with that and says, likewise, the medicine of the Prophet will only be beneficial for certain types of bodies, those who follow the prophetic guidance. As for the one who does not, then the medicine of the Prophet is not because there's something deficient in the Quran that it's not healing the heart of a munafiq. It is because the heart of a munafiq is diseased. And likewise, it is not because the medicine of the Prophet is deficient that it's not curing a certain body. It's because that body is diseased. It doesn't want to live in accordance with the prophetic medicine in general. Right? So this is something that you really have to understand. That if you want to use the prophetic medicine like honey and hijama and all the various other things which we find mentioned in the sunnah, zamzam, dates, cow's milk, and whatever else that are mentioned which are specifically tied, the black seed, to curing and curing of disease, then you have to live the lifestyle. Right? You have to live the lifestyle. You have to abide by the things that we mentioned, and you have to study the issue of like nutrition as well and food as well, and how in a modern environment, how can you ensure that you are eating with quality and in quantity, right? So you have to make that choice, and you have to go ahead and study how you can implement that. So with that, we will conclude there. We've gone on for 2 hours and 6 minutes, but due to the importance of this topic, I hope that we've covered enough principles and things within this lecture which will give you a foundation and a guideline which to take further. And let me just finish with one more thing, which again will be of benefit, because I don't want to miss anything that's useful to you practically. There's a good model that you can use, in fact, of disease. And the best thing which I've seen and I've read in terms of a model of disease, which is very easy to remember, is the following. Imagine a pyramid. In fact, I have a drawing here somewhere if I can show it to you. Right, so here you have a pyramid. Pyramid has 3 levels, and at the top there is 1 block. I've labeled it number 1. In the middle there are 2 blocks, and at the bottom there are 6 blocks. Right, this pyramid. Right, if you look at that, if you remember that, this will be a good model. In the top, number 1, which is the top level of the pyramid, this is basically the individual cell, the human cell. Because your body is made of trillions of cells, and your health actually comes down to the health of the individual cell. It makes sense, right? So the cell, the individual cell, when it's functioning in the optimal level, you will be with good health. And so health and disease really at the micro level comes down to what's happening at the cellular level. Each and every single cell, when we isolate it, what's happening in that cell? Right? So health and disease comes down to the individual cell. Now, what are the things that can affect the cell and put it into a disease? Right? Now, we're not looking at any specific disease. We're looking at disease in general, meaning that every single disease will arise by one of these 2 methods which are in the second block. Right? And that will only be 2 things. It is either a nutritional deficiency, right? That there is something missing in the biochemical pathways in the processes. There's something missing, or there's something that's not doing the job because it's deficient, it's not present, or it's not present in the right amounts, or there's a malfunction in that biochemical process, right? So that is a deficiency. Right, so it's making the cell malfunction because it hasn't got the enzyme or the factor or the mineral or whatever else it is, or it's not able to produce an enzyme or something. There's something there that's not allowing the cell to function. So it's either a deficiency, or the second one, it is a toxicity. There's something in your cell which is toxic that is blocking the biochemical pathways. So the cell cannot do what it's supposed to do. Right? And so over time, a disease condition will arise. So the point being that you can think of every single disease, no matter what type it is, will always come down at the cellular level to one of these 2 things. Either it's a deficiency in something, or there is a toxicity that's causing that disease. Right? So that's the second level now, yeah? So number one is the cell, and the two things that can go wrong with it: deficiency, toxicity. Then there are 6 pathways underneath. There are 6 different elements that can contribute to that. What are they? Number one, it is nutrition. What you eat, nutrition. There could be deficiency in nutrition, right? You are lacking in vitamin D, for example. You are lacking in the mineral selenium, for example. You are lacking in, omega-3 fatty acids, for example. Right? They are affecting the biochemistry of the body. So nutrition is a pathway by which the cell becomes deficient. Then there is toxins, toxicity. Right? So your environment, there's pollution, there's electromagnetic radiation, there's wireless, the cell phones, whatever else is coming to you. This is affecting your cells, right? Because the cells are electric as well. There's electric impulses involved as well. So it's affecting you, right? So toxicity can be chemical, it can be electrical, it can be in terms of waves, it can be even emotions, toxic emotions, envy, greed, jealousy, right? These are toxic emotions, and they can affect a person's health as well. Right, so second is of the things at the bottom level, which are 6 in number, is toxicity in these different ways. Third element is the physical element of the body. We spoke about exercise, that can affect the cell as well. The fourth element is the psychological element, right? The fifth element is a genetic element, genes, right? So you might have abuse in your lifestyle in terms of diet, in terms of rest, in terms of whatever else. Those switch on genes, switch off genes, right? That abuse is embedded and it gets passed on to your children. So your children have certain ailments, right? This can happen over generations. So the genetic element is there as well. And finally, the medical element, which is a lot of disease can actually be caused by wrongful medication, right? And especially in an age where drugs are pushed upon people which are of questionable benefit, and so medication, taking the wrong medication, the wrong treatment, that itself can be a cause of the deficiency or toxicity in a cell that in turn leads to disease. So basically the best way to look at it is think of disease as only ever being one thing. The cell is not working properly. There's only one disease, right? Now the manifestations of that disease can take many different forms. There's cancer, there's diabetes, there's there's heart disease, there's this, there's that, whatever. All the diseases you can ever think of, they are just different manifestations of one underlying disease, which is really the individual cell. There's something wrong with it. It's not working the right way. That will only ever be caused by one of 2 ways: deficiency or toxicity, right, at the biochemical level. What led to that will be one of 6 things, right? Nutrition, toxicity, physical aspects, psychological aspects, genetic elements, or medical, wrong medication, or a combination of these things together, right? So this is a model that you can use, which is a beneficial model that you can use just to grasp the concept of disease, and how to put down a program for you, for yourself, for your family, to try and put things to set things right, inshallah ta'ala. So with that, we will conclude. If there are any questions and answers, questions that you want on anything that might have been unclear in my lesson, just for the sake of any clarifications. So if there's anything that is unclear to you or you might feel needs elaboration, then we'll have a few minutes for that. Otherwise, we will close the session there because it is late, and we'll conclude. And I believe the shop will be open for the people who want to go to the shop, to the bookstore, to the health store. So
just this one at the bottom.
Which one? Okay, the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a question to do with different views and opinions which are found amongst nutritionists and even health practitioners and even doctors, for example, where you find conflicting views about oils, for example. Is this oil good or is that oil bad? This really comes down to It's something that you have to research, as Ibn Al-Qayyim said. There's an element of medicine where it's down to research, experimentation, and to a large degree, it's down to you making your research and looking from other people's experience and practice and experience with things. And that's why, as I said to you, it's important to understand that the Sharia did not come with specifics. It came with general principles. And it left people in their own cultures and civilizations to go and pursue cures, based upon what they experience. So when it comes to issues like this, is olive oil good for frying, or is coconut oil good for this, then that's up to you to go and research and find out and learn from other people's experiences, and there's enough information out there to make a reasonable choice, right? Now, it's not the case that every time you're going to find the absolute truth on the specific thing, but every time you're trying to make a reasoned, adequate choice. And it might be the case that at some point you learn new information and you make that you adapt to that, and so another time some other information comes to you and you adapt to that as well. This is how it is. This is how it is, right? So you pursue this and you continue this, and so there isn't any. I can't really say, a specific right or wrong in these issues. It's something for you to make an educated, reasonable choice. And any time some information comes to you, then you change. Because these are the worldly affairs in which the definitives are not as clear as what we find in the religion, in the affairs of the religion. So this is open to you, and it's an open field. And there's discussion and things like this, criticism. These are open, and we don't, become, how can we put it, firmly entrenched and have, bigotry in these kind of issues. It's open for discussion and research and whatever else. Now, that does not mean to say that we cannot criticize things which are clearly established to be wrong or to be malpractice or to be whatever else. We can do that. But in these kind of things where, it's open. Is there a hadith which says one of the signs of the last day is the appearance of diseases which did not exist before? Well, the hadith which I mentioned earlier, there's a hadith in which the Messenger of Allah, he did mention specifically the open obscenity and lewdness when people engage in shameful deeds openly in public, and they divulge them openly and spread them and do it in the open, then there will be diseases that will appear amongst them that never appeared in their forefathers and their ancestors. Right? So that's the specific hadith that I know. As for that, with this general wording, Allahu A'lam, Allahu A'lam, I don't know. Okay, inshallah, we will conclude our session there for today. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.